j'ai du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
What is going on at the Justice Department under Attorney General Bill Barr? I mean, a number of issues coming to light this week that really deserve serious explanations. And quite frankly, it's Barr who has some explaining to do. New York Governor Cuomo lashing out at the AG today, demanding an investigation after Department of Homeland Security officials admitted in court that they lied about a decision to punish New York State. How? By denying its residents participation in the Global Entry Program. Because the Trump administration was actually mad at the state over immigration policy.
Well, look, if you're Attorney General Barr, you have to look in the mirror sooner or later, right? And you're right. There's no way he's going to go down in the book of distinguished attorneys general, in my opinion. But you had to have a modicum of self-respect somewhere when you know that you have a cabinet department, Homeland Security, that was a political ploy, that lied about it, that got caught. At one point, don't you have to do something, John, that has something to do with justice when you're the head of the Department of Justice?
I mean, it may be Barr looking in the mirror, but it's going to be the reflection on every member of the Department of Justice, including the devoted career servants. Then this week, Barr completely misled the public about the results of Operation Legend, a federal anti-crime program begun in Kansas City and set to be expanded to other cities. Take a listen.
We have named the operation, as we've said, Operation Legend, and we started rolling it out a couple of weeks ago in Kansas City. And just to give you an idea of what's possible, the FBI went in very strong into Kansas City, and within 2 weeks, we've had 200 arrests.
200 arrests? Nobody in Kansas City knew what he was talking about. And so the Justice Department had to scramble and said that Barr was including arrests dating back to December all of a sudden. So was Barr deliberately trying to mislead or lie to Americans so President Trump can brandish his campaign theme of a law and order president? I mean, when Barr speaks, what are we supposed to believe? And frankly, this is not the question that you want. You don't want to question the credibility of the person who is overseeing the Department of Justice. But at least we may get some answers from the Justice Department Inspector General on how DOJ employees are being used against protesters. I mean, the Washington Post reports that the IG will look into the role of federal law enforcement officers in the violent removal of peaceful protesters from Lafayette Park near the White House back in June. You see that there. The operation was overseen by Attorney General Barr himself, who was on hand before officers moved in on protesters. Although he denies protesters were pushed away so President Trump could do this photo op with the Bible in his hand in front of St. John's Episcopal Church. A denial, shall we say, it's complicated. Complicated by the fact that that's exactly what happened. The truth is so tricky sometimes, isn't it? And this week, the Attorney General was highly critical of the nationwide outrage at the killing of George Floyd while a Minneapolis police officer knelt on his neck.
We had that terrible event in Minneapolis, but then we had this extreme reaction that has demonized police and called for the defunding of police departments. And what we have seen then is a significant increase in violent crime in many cities. And this rise is a direct result of the attack on the police forces and the weakening of police forces.
I mean, we had that death, and then we had the extreme response. I mean, look, the spike in crime in our cities is absolutely alarming. Full stop. It needs to be addressed immediately. Second, full stop. But you and I know that there is a certain callousness to the Attorney General calling the reaction to George Floyd's death extreme. Barr made those remarks in front of President Trump, who has shown limited empathy, shall we say, about the killing of Mr. George Floyd. I mean, last month, Barr said it's undeniable that many African Americans lack confidence in our justice system, but then, of course, said there really wasn't systemic bias or racism. And what's happened since then? The Barr Justice Department also got whacked on the knuckles this week by a federal judge who released Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, from prison again today to serve the rest of his sentence in home confinement. He was first released, if you recall, back in May, only to be sent back this month. The federal government was claiming that he violated the terms of his release. Now, Cohen claimed that he went back to prison in retaliation. Retaliation for writing an upcoming tell-all book about Trump. The judge saw it Cohen's way. Now, I worked in the Justice Department, and the Attorney General may be chosen by the president. He serves at the pleasure of the president, but he works for the American people who should not be pleased to think about the Department of Justice becoming a pseudo Department of Retaliation. The Attorney General is not the president's personal lawyer. He's yours, and he's supposed to stand for justice. The Attorney General has a lot of explaining to do about his actions, and now he's running the Justice Department. And on behalf of my former colleagues who were devoted career public servants in that very department, I certainly hope he won't run morale underground.
It is Monday, the 27th of July of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays because it's Monday. Yeah. Well, we did have another one of those weekends. It seemingly less intense in some ways, though I would say the civil unrest that's still occurring in our cities and really even in our rural areas. When I say civil unrest, the mere act of holding a sign seeking redress with your government is considered to be a terrorist activity now. Who knew? Who knew? Well, there's a lot of answering a lot of these guys and gals have to do. Yes, they're going to be asked about, really, were you just doing your job? And they'll say, yeah, I was just doing my job. I was just following orders. Well, you know what? That's not good enough. Never has and never will be. And when we have that Truth and Reconciliation Commission and hearings, which I like to call the Nuremberg trials in Nuremberg, Pennsylvania, to be honest with you, I'd like to drop the reconciliation part and just get right to the retribution. You know, a Truth and Retribution Commission. I'm that impatient now. That's a nice way of saying I'm pissed. How dare these ghouls do what they're doing? Consciously, too. You know, I know everybody is putting out this cognitive analysis of Trump that, oh, you know, he has diminished capacity. I don't care. He knows what he's doing. He knows what's right from wrong. Otherwise, they wouldn't try to cover it up. And I know you might say, well, he's doing it blatantly, and that's even worse. All right? Because he revels in that. He revels in watching people squirm. He likes to look in the eye and dig the knife in deep and twist it while he's looking deep in your eye. Yeah, ask Mary. She knows. She knows what it's like. Yeah, he finds a certain glee in that. Always has. You know, he's the kind of kid that probably abused frogs when he was a little kid. Man, Okay, well, it's the general progression of things, and here we are. We got one of those as the President of the United States. Never would have got there without a little bit of help from a hostile foreign power who's trying to help him again. Look, I know China and any other number of countries are trying to, influence our elections, but Vlad's got Cambridge Analytica and the Trump campaign to help. They did not fire Brad Parscale for having an affair with Hope Hicks, yeah. So, boy, she gets a lot of guys sort of out of the way. I wonder if that's on purpose. Who knows? Anyway, palace intrigue. Jeez, there's a lot of it there, too. This is only Monday, after all. Anyway, Brad Parscale never got fired. He got, some say demoted. No, he's doing the same thing he was doing all along. All right? Organizing the data with the help of whatever Cambridge Analytica has become. And Vlad's helping out a lot. He's, they're stealing stuff right now as we speak. I keep hearing about an October surprise like that might be a vaccine. Give me a break. That's a vaccine's going to suddenly turn everybody around and go, oh, he's such a miracle worker. No, the vaccine's going to suck. And there's going to be something else as an October surprise. Probably martial law. That would be a surprise, wouldn't it? Yeah, as if we're not feeling it right now. Indeed. Well, we have a lot on our plate today, in relative terms, of course, so we might as well dig in to see what we have in the offing. Of course, at the top, Bill Barr does testify in front of the House tomorrow. The Judiciary Committee, is that who it is? Is that who oversees the Department of Justice? Anyway, I say the jury's still out that he's going to even show. He's supposed to, but something might come up. All right, I know. There's always going to be something. He probably has to go and do some generaling out in the battle space. Somewhere in Middle America. We got some tanks in Middle America. I got to go generalship the battle space. Can't come here to this oversight committee hearing because I got to go to the battle space. He's not that kind of a general, but he thinks he is. Anyway, he's got a lot of explaining to do. Yes, he does, about his actions and how he's been running the Justice Department. A lot of explaining. On the rest of the menu, bypassing a judge's blockade. Yeah, there was a restraining order. You can't use any of that information. Well, ProPublica published the disciplinary records of the NYPD because they were not named as a party to the police union lawsuit. Yeah, there was a rule or a law that passed that these disciplinary records could be opened, under certain conditions, of course, could be open to the public, and the police union said, oh, no, you can't. People will think these are bad cops. Well, no kidding. Look at their record. Anyway, ProPublica wasn't named in the lawsuit. So too bad, Mr. Police Union. The fight for police-free schools has been years in the making. Yeah, resource officers, give me a break. And South Dakota's federal coronavirus relief funds went to law enforcement instead of everybody else. Wow. I didn't know they had that kind of problem in South Dakota, that they needed a military police force. Well, they do have the Sioux Indian Reservation. You never know when they're going to get mad again. Never. After the break, we move to the chef's table where France condemned a far-right protest that targeted a black lawmaker. Yeah. They won't name the extremist right-wing group, but it sounds suspiciously like the National Front, especially since it's in the town in that part of France that has the headquarters of the National Front. Wow. And Germany rejected Trump's proposal to let Putin back into the G7, which would make it the G8. And they said, no way. This guy's trying to break up NATO. Come on. What are you thinking? And Trump says, I'm just doing what I'm told. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the link to our Patreon page. Do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Your pledge could be the cost of an espresso-type coffee drink, maybe. That pledge on a monthly basis helps us pay our bills, fly under the radar, because you have to do that to be able to resist. And then we are able to resist as the founders originally intended, so many eons ago, probably before the Magna Carta even. Anyway, thank you for your generosity. It's going to be 10 years after winter. And that's coming up. That's going to come up quick. 10 years of Resistance Radio, 24/7, 365. Well, we actually went 24/7, 365 a little bit later in the spring when we started. But anyway, up and running, coming up. So thank you for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty. Your generosity has done that. And we're going to continue doing it because, hey, it doesn't look like it's going to be ending even when it's supposed to end. You can't just say, oh, well, we're done now. No, it's a battle. The war will always be going on, apparently, especially with this type. Look, if you're going to maintain the ship of state, you got to rub out the rust, the corrosive elements that destroy the ship of state. We got one of those going on right now. We got a lot of elbow grease to put to work. So let's do it. All righty. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and does a lot more too. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam on Twitter, and you might as well follow me there because I do post the show notes and links diary. It's always going to be a diary to me. I'm sorry. I'm so old school. Not a story. Jeez. What is this world coming to? I post that show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime and really scramble to get it out on social media because that's what you're supposed to do. I know some people have it done automatically. Well, I don't know how. I've been told, but it didn't stick. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube. Is it still iTunes or is it supposed to be Apple Podcasts now? I can't keep that up with that. But really, wherever you get podcasts, we will be there. Even on Deezer. What the hell is Deezer? Okay. Before we get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, I want to make a short mention about John Lewis being interred yesterday and the passing of a giant. And we can't let any of this be forgotten. I fear that's going to be the case. people know so little about what happened in World War II because, well, the people who were my grandparents, they're dead, okay? Long dead. And it's been up to us to be able to pass on that legacy, and not many of us have been able to do it, I don't know, efficiently, because look at where we are. We fought fascists over there so we wouldn't have to fight them here, not knowing that actually the fascists over there and the Nazis over there used a lot of our racist policies as a model for their systems. So we better, like I said, put some elbow grease to the corrosive elements that are destroying this ship of state. And we better do it right now. And the other thing I want to mention is this shooting of a protester in Austin, Texas. A fellow who, in an open carry state, by the way. So he's carrying a gun. Yeah, I know that might be provocative. But when you got guys walking into Walmart with these big old weapons of war strapped around their shoulders, intimidating people and laughing about it, why is it that when a liberal of sorts does that, that's considered to be so provocative that, oh, well, of course he should be shot. He shouldn't have been doing that. We're in Texas, where, by the way, this is where when I say we, I mean this incident. And what was he doing? Actually, there's reports that, he pointed the gun at the driver as the driver tried to run down protesters. Really? But apparently he didn't do any of that. He was pushing his paraplegic wife. Paraplegic because of amputations. He was pushing her in a wheelchair. And a guy comes barreling down the highway right at these protesters because, hey, you don't have a right to block my street. And they were in a crosswalk, but hey. And then he started firing. Witnesses there said the guy had his arm out the window just firing at people. So this is where we are. We had another altercation, I believe, in North Carolina, where some anti-racist protesters were confronted by some counter-protesters, as they call them in the newspapers. I call them brown shirts. Come there to bust some heads, and the cops just stood by and watched it happen. I wonder why that is. Yeah, we better purge the ranks of our police department. Defund the police? How about purging the cops of all these racists and Nazis? Along with the steroid use. I think that has a lot to do with bad policing. But that's just me. I'm a romantic. Speaking of which, let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe. It comes out of the Associated Press by anonymous worker bees, because when you're dealing with Vladimir Putin or our police, you have to be anonymous. Days after a federal judge paused the public release of New York City police disciplinary records, a news website, they're a journal, has published a database containing complaint information for thousands of officers. Thousands? Well, yeah, they have what, 15, 20,000? Is that how many? ProPublica posted the database yesterday, Sunday, explaining in a note to readers that it isn't obligated to comply with Judge Catherine Polk Faya's temporary restraining order because it is not party to a union lawsuit challenging the release of such records. Deputy Managing Editor Eric Umansky said ProPublica requested the information from the city's police watchdog agency, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, soon after last month's repeal of a state law that for decades had prevented the disclosure of disciplinary records. Unions representing police officers and other public safety workers sued the city on July 15th to block Mayor Bill de Blasio from making good on a pledge to start posting misconduct complaints on a government website. The unions argue that allowing the public to see unproven or false complaints could sully officers' reputations and compromise their safety, except they weren't going to be posting unproven or false complaints. These union guys for the police. You know, they're like a mob. They've taken over the union, and look what they've done. They corrupted it. What did they do with the mob union bosses? Yeah, they threw them in jail. Maybe we ought to start doing that. A state judge who first handled the case had issued a narrower restraining order that temporarily blocked the public disclosure of records concerning unsubstantiated and non-finalized allegations or settlement agreements. ProPublica said it excluded allegations that investigators deemed unfounded from the material it published. In all, the searchable database contains 12,056 complaints against 3,996 active NYPD officers. We understand the arguments against releasing this data, but we believe the public good it could do outweighs the potential harm, ProPublica editor-in-chief Stephen Engelberg said. The database gives the people of New York City a glimpse at how allegations involving police misconduct have been handled, and allows journalists and ordinary citizens alike to look more deeply at the records of particular officers, and that's what the police unions don't want. You can't look at our particular officers, and people might get the wrong idea. Yeah, that is more than just a few rotten apples, huh? The judge's ruling, because I cannot pronounce her name, Faya's ruling on Wednesday last blocks the CCRB, the police department, and other entities from disclosing disciplinary records until at least August 18th, which you'll hear arguments in the case. In issuing the temporary restraining order, she also barred the New York chapter of the ACLU from publicly releasing records it had already obtained. The organization said it requested officer misconduct complaints under the state's open records law and received them before the union's lawsuit was filed. Like ProPublica, the NYCLU argued it was not a party to the lawsuit, but apparently she didn't name ProPublica, so too bad. The federal court has no authority to bar us from making it public, and we will contest this unprecedented order as quickly as possible, New York Legal Union Legal Director Christopher Dunn said. Astrid Galvin of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. The group of protesters started out small, just a handful of students who told officials at school board meetings why they wanted police out of Madison, Wisconsin schools. Over 4 years, their numbers grew, but not their results. So they took to yelling from the audience and making emotional pleas about how police make students, especially those of color, feel unsafe. But officers remained at 4 high schools in the Madison Metropolitan School District until George Floyd's death by Minneapolis police ushered in a national reckoning over police brutality and racial injustice. That's when the school board president, who had long resisted removing police, had a change of heart. Madison quickly joined cities like Minneapolis, Phoenix, Denver, and Portland, Oregon, in abandoning partnerships with police on campus. The move may seem sudden, but it follows years of well-organized, student-driven action. Only now, more grown-ups are listening. Police officers assigned to schools wear a uniform, carry guns, and get specialized training, like how to choke little kids off with your knee. Critics say having armed police on campus often results in black students being disproportionately arrested and punished, leading to what they call the schools to prison pipeline. Supporters say police make schools safer and that having someone trained to deal with young people is more effective than having random officers respond to large fights and other problems. At the Madison School Board protests, we would basically go up there, be nice, and when you would look up, when you were talking, they would be looking down at their phone or their computer. So that made us even more frustrated, said Shira Adams, age 20, who graduated from high school in 2017 and is now a youth justice coordinator with Freedom Inc., the group behind the protests. Adams says opponents called her and others thugs or angry protesters, anything but youths. She attended nearly every monthly meeting since 2016, sharing how she was injured when two school resource officers broke up a fight between her and a boy she said was bullying her friend. Adams said the officers twisted her arm. They let the boy, who was white, go to class, and he got 2 days of suspension while she got 5. Well, she was an angry black girl, you know. I knew there's absolutely no way I can build a relationship with somebody like that, Adams said of the officers. The movement to pull police from campuses has been decades in the making, like when I was going to school. Because right when I started to graduate, they started bringing cops on campus. They hadn't gotten rid of all of the high school counselors, but after a year from when I graduated, they had there was 3 of them. And all that was left was that one resource officer. Yeah, he knows a lot about how to get you into college. We were noticing that when you have police in schools, you have a culture clash. And that culture clash is that their job is to protect people, but also enforce the criminal code. And they were enforcing criminal code on regular teen behavior, Diana said of the early beginnings of the movement. Recent national data on arrests at schools is hard to come by. I wonder why. Police union stuff again? Yes, indeed it is. But studies from a few years ago show that black students are disproportionately punished, both in schools and by law enforcement. During the 2015-2016 school year, black students accounted for 15% of total enrollment, but 31% of students referred to law enforcement or arrested, according to the civil rights data collection put out by the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. But then, do you notice the dates? When Trump comes into office, they start giving out that data. Yes, indeed. Trump's election brought a big momentum, but it took 3 years for the superintendent to announce the Phoenix Union High School District would not renew its $1.2 million contract with police. Its superintendent said, I feel that students have been advocating this for a long time, and it brings hope that the district is willing to change. Activists in Madison also were celebrating the change of heart. The June 29 vote to eliminate police from high schools was introduced by school board president Gloria Reyes, a former police officer who had long resisted calls to abandon the contract. Stephen Groves of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. As South Dakota looks to use $1.25 billion in federal coronavirus relief funds, one of the largest expenditures has been to law enforcement. The money set by Congress as part of the $2.2 trillion stimulus was a major windfall for South Dakota. a state that prides itself on low taxes and a minimal state budget, which I means minimal state services. Its share is equivalent to roughly a quarter of the state budget, but the funds came with a stipulation that they be used in addressing the pandemic, and anything unused would be returned at the end of the year. Governor Kristi Noem's administration opted to use the money to pay salaries for law enforcement officers, because you need them in a pandemic. You need guns and tanks in a pandemic. That decision drew questions this week from legislators on a committee auditing the budget who wondered what portion of police officers' salaries should be justified as addressing the pandemic. The entire salary of police officers can be paid from those funds, according to Lisa Clark, the commissioner of the Bureau of Finance and Management. The U.S. Treasury's guidance is that public safety and public health officials are substantially dedicated to addressing COVID-19, she told lawmakers. The designation for law enforcement will make up a substantial amount of the money spent from the Coronavirus Relief Fund. The state has spent about $75 million of the federal funds so far. Most of that, $45.6 million, has gone to paying unemployment benefits. But the Department of Public Safety has received more funding than any other state agency besides the Department of Health and the Board of Regents. So far, the state has used $4.5 million to pay salaries and benefits at the Department of Public Safety, which mostly went to highway patrol officers. Maybe the patrol officers are doing contact tracing. I wonder. Facial recognition, contact tracing, maybe? The state is also making $200 million available to city and county governments, and they can pay police officers' salaries from the fund. Most of those grants have not been processed yet. But the legislator's auditor, Bob Christensen, warned lawmakers that it is not clear what exactly can be claimed under the federal relief fund. He cautioned against aggressive claims and pointed out that the Treasury has advised that the money can only cover salaries of employees substantially dedicated towards COVID. It's caused a lot of concern by auditors on whether or not this is what was intended, he said. Clark countered that warning, saying that the state is so confident that police officers are covered under the federal funding that it is working with the Treasury to pay for salaries for court service officers, prison guards, and parole officers. That's how confident they are. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Julia Rosen. Here are two things that you probably didn't think were connected: the COVID-19 pandemic and weather forecasts. But there is a link. Commercial air travel. As jetliners carry passengers around the world, they also collect vital weather measurements, like air temperature and wind speed. During the pandemic, however, air travel has come almost to a halt.
In February, let's say we have 100%, and then in March, we go down by half, and April go down by another half. So currently, possibly we just have 1/4 of aircraft running. So you can imagine the gap of observations.
Ying Chen, a meteorologist at the University of Lancaster in England. To create weather forecasts, meteorologists need to feed accurate information about current weather conditions into their models, and planes are one of the best ways to get such info, since they sample the atmosphere at different altitudes and locations. But with the coronavirus grounding flights around the world, meteorologists are feeling the loss.
I have analyzed 3 months of spring, which is March, April, and May, and I see temperature, wind speed, and the forecast accuracy all goes down.
Forecast quality declined the most for long-range projections and over remote areas where planes are one of the few sources of data. In Greenland, for example, the accuracy of temperature forecasts has decreased by as much as 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Areas with heavy air traffic like the US and China were also affected because fewer flights means less data. Europe made out better thanks to its dense network of ground-based weather stations. The results are in the journal Geophysical Research Letters. Subpar forecasts may sound like little more than a headache. After all, weather is notoriously unpredictable. But Chen says it could be a big problem for many industries, like utilities, which have to estimate household heating and cooling needs in order to meet electricity demand. Farmers also rely heavily on forecasts to decide when to plant and harvest crops. And Chen says that lower quality forecasts could make it harder to provide early warning for extreme weather events.
Now we are going to summer, so we have hurricane season or monsoon seasons.
If so, we can only hope that while COVID keeps the skies quiet, the weather stays quiet too. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Julia Rosen.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
President Donald Trump is deploying federal law enforcement troops to Portland, Albuquerque, Kansas City, and he says Chicago, Detroit, New York, Philadelphia, and other major cities are on his list as well. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Those federal agents from the Department of Homeland Security, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the FBI, Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and the U.S. Marshals Service, thousands of them, are being deployed over the objection of mayors of those cities and the governors of those states. Tom Ridge, the country's first director of the Department of Homeland Security, who served under President George W. Bush, warned that DHS, quote, was not established to be the president's personal militia. It would be a cold day in hell before I would give consent to a unilateral, uninvited intervention into any one of those cities, he said. But Trump's acting director of DHS, Chad Wolf, says, I don't need invitations by the state mayors or its state governors to do our job. We're going to do that whether they like us there or not. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot said that she would welcome a partnership with federal law enforcement, but added, we do not welcome dictatorship, authoritarianism, or unconstitutional arrests and detainment of our residents. The protests continue, and multiple lawsuits have been filed against the federal actions. How this maelstrom plays out in the courts and in our political institutions will determine a lot about the future of freedom in America. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. Labor leader Mother Mary Harris Jones was leading a march of children laborers to President Theodore Roosevelt's summer home in New York. The long march had began 20 days before in Philadelphia. Mother Jones was hoping to draw national attention to the plight of child workers. The action caught the public's attention, and across the nation, newspapers reported on the March of the Mill Children. All the way in Leadville, a town in the mountains of Colorado west of Denver, the Herald Democrat carried the story of Mother Jones's East Coast March. The paper's July 27th article began, quote, "It is a pathetic spectacle. That little army of Mother Jones, marching through the broiling heat of summer, lay a petition before the president. She says truly that her errand is as vital as any which takes persons to Oyster Bay. She comes to please the cause of the child laborers, and to emphasize her protest, has with her several score of ill-clad, puny children, the result of the enforced work of these children in factories. When the children's march reached the president's door 2 days later, the president was not there to meet them. Yet the march had sparked national attention. In 1904, the National Child Labor Committee formed to take action on the issue. Pennsylvania passed tougher child labor restrictions the next year. But federal protections would have to wait until the next President Roosevelt. The passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act in 1938, signed by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, finally included nationwide limits to child labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Greetings from the new global epicenter of the pandemic. Yeah, Florida recorded 9,300 new coronavirus cases on Sunday, passing New York as the state with the second most infections. Florida now has 423,855 confirmed cases, second only to California, with 448,497 as of Sunday afternoon. New York is number 3, with 415,827. Here in Florida, we added more than 10,000 cases a day in July, while California added 8,300 and New York just 700. But despite the surge, Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis has rejected imposing a statewide mask requirement and continues to insist that public schools must reopen in August. New York still has recorded the most COVID-19 deaths with more than 32,000. Administration officials said Sunday that the Senate Republicans' new coronavirus relief proposal will be unveiled on Monday. This after the original plan was to release it last Thursday. Allegedly, this new plan will include another round of $1,200 stimulus checks. White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow said that in addition to the checks, the legislation would extend but reduce extra unemployment benefits. The Republican plan is expected to cost about $1 trillion. The House, under Democratic control, already approved a $3 trillion proposal in May, the HEROES Act. It includes new stimulus checks, more money for coronavirus testing and contract tracing, and renewal of the $600 per week in extra unemployment benefits, which will expire at the end of the month, which is the end of this week. The two sides are pretty far apart on just about everything. Democrats are in the $3 to $4 trillion neighborhood. Republicans want to keep it closer to $1 trillion. In the Republican plan, there is no monetary assistance for state or local governments. Democrats want close to $1 trillion. The Democrats' education money is 4 times what Republicans are offering. And in the Republican plan, the unemployment insurance is pared way back. Yeah, there's a long way to go on every front, and yet there has been no contact between the administration and congressional Democrats since Friday. This week will be the beginning of bipartisan talks, which will likely continue through the middle of August. The Trump administration's deployment of unidentified militarized federal law enforcement agents to put down protests in Portland and a few other cities has served to re-energize the protests against police brutality and racial injustice. Over the weekend, police and protesters clashed in cities from Los Angeles, California to Richmond, Virginia, as demonstrators expressed anger over arrests made by these unmarked, unidentified federal agents around the Portland Federal Courthouse. In Portland on Sunday, the crowd swelled to about 1,000 who gathered for the 60th straight night of protests in the city since the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis police custody. In Seattle, at least 47 protesters were arrested on Saturday night alone. The Department of Homeland Security has said a response team from U.S. Customs and Border Protection will be sent to Seattle to remain on standby to help protect federal facilities. There were protests throughout the weekend in other cities, in Aurora, Colorado, Oakland, California, Louisville, Kentucky, and other cities. In Austin, Texas, a man was killed on Saturday after shots were fired into a crowd of protesters. A suspect there is in custody. And if all that's not enough, the tropics are active. Hurricane Hannah hit the Texas Gulf Coast on Saturday and continued to batter the coast with high winds and heavy rains on Sunday. Now a tropical depression, Hannah dumped more than a foot of rain on parts of South Texas and northeastern Mexico. Some patients in healthcare facilities were airlifted out of communities along the U.S.-Mexico border. But officials there are still cautioning people to seek help despite fear of exposure to COVID-19. The CEO of Red Cross Texas Gulf Coast chapter said, yes, coronavirus provides risk, but so does floodwater. So does not having electricity. So does not having required medications. Now, further west, a few sighs of relief as Hurricane Douglas passed just north of the western end of the Hawaiian island chain Sunday night. Forecasters said early Monday that hurricane warnings, though, still remain in effect for Oahu and Kauai. Douglas is a Category 1 storm with top sustained winds at 85 miles per hour. Any landfall would be just the third in Hawaii in modern history. The body of Congressman John Lewis on Sunday crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, one last time. It's where he and hundreds of other civil rights protesters were stopped and beaten by state and local police in March of 1965. Of the beating he sustained when he was just 25, John Lewis once said, "I gave a little blood on that bridge. I thought I was going to die." The memorial event on Sunday, which organizers called The Final Crossing, was part of a multi-day celebration of John Lewis's life. Bloody Sunday helped galvanize support for the Civil Rights Act of 1965 and became a central part of Lewis's legacy. John Lewis, who died just over a week ago after a 6-month battle with cancer, is lying in state in the U.S. Capitol on Monday. And finally, they say it comes in threes, and that's what happened this weekend. We lost a film icon, a TV icon, and a music icon this weekend, with the loss of actress Olivia de Havilland at 104 years old, television's Regis Philbin, and Fleetwood Mac founder Peter Green.
I can't help about the shape I'm in. I can't sing, I ain't pretty, and my legs are thin. But don't ask me what I think of you. I might not give the answers that you want me to.
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh my God, and it's supposed to be cooler today than yesterday. Well, by cooler, they mean that it's only going to be, about 100. Really? Because yesterday it was about 107. Yeah, great. Well, sunshine with clouds mixed. A stray shower or thunderstorm is possible, which puts us into a red flag warning for grass and wildfires in our forests, because the rain may not be enough to put out the spot fires caused by the lightning. Darn. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, which is strong enough to fan the flames. Overnight lows in the upper 60s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then tomorrow we'll have mostly sunny skies with highs around 101 to 102. Really now. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed coronavirus cases in Jackson County here in Southern Oregon is now at 269. We'll go up later today because we'll get the rest of the weekend totals possible. Dry conditions may continue, except there is about a 30% chance of precipitation right here at the mothership. And as I look out, it looks like it could be happening. The grass pollen has now been rated at moderate. It's come down a little bit right outside the mothership. And the air quality index has increased from good to moderate at 52 parts per million because of some wildfires in California just across the border. The daytime UV index remains very high at 9, so take care if you see that number in your area. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.92 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 62%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 66 and cloudy. Paris is 90 degrees and sunny. Rome is 94 and sunny with a heat advisory that could shut down the electric grid. Kyiv is 85 and fair. Kabul is 85 and fair. Hong Kong is 84 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 78 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 58 with rain and heavy wind. San Francisco, California is 54 and cloudy with a fog advisory. And New York is 92 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny with a heat advisory, so do take care. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. France's Interior Minister vowed on Saturday to fight hateful ideology after far-right extremists posted photos of a protest outside the offices of a black lawmaker. The lawmaker, Sarah Sila, tweeted a photo of the small demonstration along with the words, "You will never affect me." The photo showed 5 white men holding placards and a banner that read, "Help the French, not the Africans." The posters and banner all bore the name of a far-right extremist group, and who is that group? The 2 men holding the banner also waved lit flares. Sila, a lawyer from the Normandy town of Rouen, where she was born, is a member of French President Emmanuel Macron's Republic on the Move party. In her tweet, she said she was more determined than ever. The Interior Minister tweeted his support and described the targeting of Sila as vile. He said France won't cede an iota to the hateful ideology of these extremist groups.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous worker bees, this time from Reuters, bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Germany rejected a proposal by Trump to invite Putin back into the Group of 7. German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said in a newspaper interview published today. Trump raised the prospect last month of expanding the G7 to again include Russia, which had been expelled following the Moscow's annexation of Ukraine's Crimea. But Maas told the Rheinische Post that he did not see any chance for allowing Russia back into the G7, as long as there was no meaningful progress in solving the conflict in Crimea as well as in eastern Ukraine. Russia is still part of the G20, though. A broader grouping, including other emerging market economies. You know, an emerging market like Russia, whose GDP is the size of Italy's. Now that is emerging. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, so do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.